All right, so we're going to do the psychology, AP Psychology Development Review. A couple things about the test. There's 26 multiple choice, one FRQ. FRQ has 5 bullet points for a total of 10 points. So that's like 62 points. Pretty typical for a test. All right, so let's get started. You have the review with you. Developmental psychology studies physical, social, and cognitive changes over time through environment, genetics, maturation, and stages. So developmental psychology studies physical, social, and cognitive changes over time. It's studied through the environment. This happens through genetics, the maturation process, and stages. The important part here is stages. We know that most developmental psychologists believe that it happens in kind of chunks, but it's also a continual development. So prenatal and early child development. Prenatal development is 40 weeks. So full-term gestation is 40 weeks of pregnancy. Early childhood development is roughly about age 0 to 4. I'm not so concerned that you know those dates, but just to have a good frame of reference. Stages. So the stages of prenatal development. The first stage is the zygote stage. This is the fertilized egg. Remember, you have 2 eggs, the fastest one there, 2 cells, I should say. The fastest one there makes 1 cell that quickly divides into 2, and then 4, 8, 16, and so on. The zygote stage is from 0 to 2 weeks. Then we go to the embryo stage. The embryonic stage is from 2 to 9 weeks of development. This is when that fertilized egg attaches to the uterus. So in the zygote stage, mother probably doesn't even know that she's pregnant. By the embryonic stage, 2 to 9 weeks, this is when rapid growth is already beginning to take place, and the baby, the zygote, attaches to the uterus. The fetal stage is from 9 to 40 weeks. This is rapid development. So this is the longest stage of development. Remember, fetus means the little one, and this is when the little one is literally becoming the little human being. Heart and lungs and brain and all of these organs and things are developing during the fetus stage or the fetal stage. So brain development after baby is born. We know that the brain is developed quickly in utero, but after the baby is born, that there's a complex network that emerges after birth because of the environment. So we see those dendrites making more and more, getting more and more complex. A complex network that emerges after birth because of the environment. So all that stimulation is making the brain more and more efficient. Remember, we talked about the pruning process, use it or lose it. You can't make any more neurons, but the ones that you are born with, the ones that you have, you can use better, more efficiently. Babies are born with natural reflexes. So in a newborn, they have a few that I would like you to know. The rooting reflex. This is when you touch a baby's cheek and they look for food. They turn toward the side of the cheek that was touched. The rooting reflex. The sucking reflex. You put an object in a baby's mouth and they can naturally suck. And the grasping reflex. An object can be put in their hand or even in their foot and they can grasp it. Necessary for continued motor and physical development. Teratogens are chemicals or agents that can cross the placenta, where nutrients and oxygen are transferred, and harm the developing child. So teratogens are chemicals or agents that can cross the placenta placenta is where the nutrients and oxygen are transferred between mother and baby and can harm the developing child. The placenta can do a lot, but it can't do it all. Drugs and alcohol, radiation, viruses, certain bacteria can cross the placenta and cause harm. One of those things that we talked about that causes some problems is called fetal alcohol syndrome. This is when mothers who drink in excess, their children are born with certain deficiencies, especially physical and cognitive problems. Fetal alcohol syndrome. Infantile amnesia. Early memories, usually before age 3, are not conscious because the brain has not developed enough. So children really cannot learn before age 3. So early memories before age 3 are not conscious because the brain has not developed enough. The hippocampus, especially, and the frontal lobes are not developed, and so they can make memories and store them. They just can't recollect them before age 3. So let's get into the first psychologist. So Piaget talked about a schema. And a schema is a child's framework that helps organize and interpret information through assimilation and accommodation. Children's framework that helps organize and interpret information through assimilation and accommodation. We didn't talk about assimilation and accommodation really at all. I did allude to them a little bit, and your book does talk about them. So lucky you, I'm giving you something from the book. So assimilation is when children modify new information and make it understood into what is already known. So they take some new information and modify it into what they already know. Accommodation is restructuring to understand more completely. So the way I like to remember the difference between assimilation and accommodation, assimilation, I always think of the SS as stays the same. So in assimilation, they're going to take this new information, but it's going to stay the same. They're just going to modify into what's already existing into their knowledge. In accommodation, they're changing. I think of the CC, constantly changing. They have to restructure to change what they know and make it fit more completely, to understand more completely. But either way, whether it's assimilation or accommodation, they're helping to organize the information that they learn. And remember, they're learning all this through their senses, which we'll talk about here in a second. So children's framework that helps organize and interpret information through assimilation and accommodation. The sensory motor stage is from age 0 to 2. This is when children learn through the senses, and we talked a lot about that when we looked at the toys, all of the see, touch, taste, smell, I'm sure to some extent, and hear. So the sensory motor stage is, part of it is a lack of object permanence. Children do not understand that objects exist even when they are not in sight. So this is going to develop through the sensory motor stage, and it's going to probably be complete by the pre-operational stage. So they have a lack of object permanence, which is an understanding that objects exist even when not in sight. So as children develop, by the end of the sensory motor stage, peekaboo should not be fun for a child anymore. And if it is, there's probably an indication that they have not reached this. And again, we know that these stages are continuous, and maybe they'll get through it, or maybe it's a red flag that needs to be brought to somebody's attention. Pre-operational stage is from age 2 to 7, age 2 to 7. And Piaget says that the important part of this stage is language. Children are going to learn to symbolize things through language in the pre-operational stage. Part of the pre-operational stage is the idea of egocentrism, where these little kids have difficulty seeing things from another's point of view. Egocentrism is the difficulty seeing things from another's point of view. A good example of this was somebody gave in class about their little brother, their 4-year-old brother, could not convince him that he, the older brother, was born before the 4-year-old brother. The little boy just could not wrap his head around this because he could not understand how anybody else could have ever come before him. Also in the pre-operational stage, they have a lack of conservation. The law of conservation is foreign to them. This is an understanding of mass and volume, sometimes even simple things like ice, that stay the same even when they appear different. So they have a lack of conservation, which means they're lacking in understanding how mass and volume stay the same even when it appears different. Eventually, they're going to learn that that is the case, but that's closer to the concrete stage. So the concrete operational stage is from age 7 to 11, roughly. This is when Piaget says that they begin to think logically. Now, instead of thinking in terms of symbolically through language, now they begin to think more logically about things. They don't have to think about the words, they can think about why things happen. This is when they can do math. In the concrete operational stage, they understand conservation. This is when they understand how things work. And the formal operational stage is from ages 11 and on, and this is abstract reasoning, when they can really understand these big ideas, the idea of metacognition, thinking about thinking. So that's Piaget. Erikson then, I'd just say all the stages, know all 8 of them and be able to apply them. Probably, according to Erikson, the most important stage is the very first one, trust versus mistrust. Erikson says that this is going to carry out throughout the rest of their lives, and that's an important stage. Then you go on to autonomy and initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, generativity, integrity. Remember, these are always the opposite spectrum. So if we're talking about initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, these carry out through the other stages. Industry and inferiority, Erikson says, also is shown and displayed throughout the rest of life and through other stages. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Between Erikson and Piaget, be really familiar with these. I think between Erikson and Piaget, I must have 5, 6, 7 questions alone on the multiple choice, and you know you're going to be seeing it on the FRQ too. All right, the attachment theories then. A couple of them. First, let's talk about Harry Harlow. Remember, he is the one who he had the theory of monkeys. And what Harlow found out was that touch is essential for cognitive, physical, and social development. Touch is essential for physical, and social development. He said that the emotional attachments that babies and children make can outweigh even basic necessities. This is what he was applying even to humans from his research with monkeys. Emotional attachment can outweigh even basic necessities. Mary Ainsworth did the strange situation test, in which she tested in their natural environment children whether they were securely attached, insecurely attached, or ambivalent, meaning They didn't have necessarily an attachment to any carer or caregiver. Cross off gender development. I'm not going to get into that question or that bit on the test. Maybe we can pick it up at another point. So, last part, Kohlberg, stages. Kohlberg talked about moral development, and he talked about these levels. I'd say levels probably more than stages. And so the pre-conventional level, Kohlberg says that this is before age 9, and the pre-conventional level is all about self-interest. It's all about you. It's all about the self. How can I gain a reward? How can I avoid punishment? How can I get what I want, and not make other people upset with me? So it's very much about the person, the self. Conventional morality is getting into early adolescence. The big part, Kohlberg says, for conventional morality is to gain social approval. You want to gain social approval. You want to avoid disapproval by family and your friends. You want to be part of a group. You want to gain acceptance. And then the post-conventional level, Kohlberg says, is from adolescence on. And this is about achieving justice. Even if it means that you're violating a law, if you feel that law is unjust, you're willing to do it. This is when you're taking yourself completely out of it and saying, this is not about me. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the benefit of others. This is a high level of moral development that some people may or may not actually get to. They get to at some point in their life, and then they kind of go back down the rungs to other levels of morality. But to Kohlberg, the highest is post-conventional level in achieving justice, knowing what's right and wrong for the good of society, not just yourself. All right, so that's it. I feel the test is pretty much what you will be expecting. Lots of information on it, and lots of theorists, so make sure you are solid on being able to apply playing the Piaget way, that handout. That will be good. There'll be questions like that for application. Erikson obviously is going to have a lot of application for them as well. So be familiar with those, and I will see you on Monday.